Hey everyone, welcome to RealFear Files. Today we're diving into 9 spine-chilling hiking stories, tales from people who went out looking for peace in the wilderness, but ended up face-to-face with things they couldn't explain. Before we jump in, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. It really helps the channel grow, and don't worry, you can always change your mind later. If you've got an idea for the next video or a story you think we should cover, drop it in the comments below. We love hearing from you, and who knows, your story might be featured next. I was 32 when I decided I needed a break from people and noise. So I took a week off work and headed for a lonely patch of woods near a nowhere town called Graver's Sink, tucked somewhere in the lower Blue Ridge. It was early December, the part of winter where the cold isn't cruel yet, but already mean enough to chew on your bones if you stop moving too long. I'd been craving quiet for months, and that area seemed perfect. Hardly any posts online, hardly any hikers mentioning it at all. Just emptiness. Graver's Sink was barely a hiccup on the map. One gas station that smelled like old oil, a boarded-up shop leaning sideways, and a church with a rusted bell that looked like it hadn't rung since the Reagan era. No one even bothered to glance at me when I rolled through. Perfect. I parked at a tiny ranger station about 2 hours past the town. Signed the logbook. A guy named Rich sat behind the desk flipping a magazine like he'd been doing it all year. When I told him I was taking the North Spur Trail, he raised his eyebrows. "Been a minute since someone logged that one," he muttered. "Snowstorm hit pretty hard. Markers might be covered. And, cabin up there is still technically standing. If you reach it, it's yours. Not that anyone else is dumb enough to head that way this week." I laughed it off and told him I was good. I had a real map, solid winter gear, crampons in my pack, 2 backup lighters. I'd done solo hikes before. I felt prepared. The first stretch went smooth. Cold, sure, but manageable. Snow crept up to my calves in some spots, and the trail dipped along narrow ridge lines that made me take slow, careful steps, but nothing felt dangerous. I reached the Firewatch cabin late afternoon, with just enough daylight to give it a once-over. It looked rougher than the online picture I'd seen. One small room, low roof, a cot that sagged in the middle, and a wood stove with a warped door. A short ladder led up to a cramped loft used for storage. No insulation worth a damn, but I got the stove going after clearing out the old ash. The single window was nailed shut with a crust of frost around the edges. No cell signal, but I'd expected that. The place sat in a quiet clearing facing west. No wind, no wildlife, just stillness. I liked the stillness. I melted snow for water, tore open a bag meal, and listened to the fire crackle. Around 10, I crawled into my layers, hat pulled low, gloves still on. I knocked out fast, until just after midnight. I woke thirsty and sat up to grab my water bottle, which I'd set on a chair beside the stove. But the chair was closer to the door. Not by much, maybe a foot, but I knew I didn't leave it like that. The door latch wasn't set either. It wasn't open, just resting loose against the frame, like someone didn't bother to click it shut. I hadn't heard wind, no draft, no noise at all. I got up, stepped outside with my headlamp sweeping around. Nothing. Not a single footprint except mine. No tracks, no animals, no drifted snow showing anything had brushed past the door. I locked the door tight, really shoved the latch, and told myself I was tired. That's all. Just tired. Morning came gray and cold. While making hot water again, I noticed marks inside by the door. 2 faint parallel lines in the grit on the wooden floor. Dragged inward. Not deep, but long. They stopped a couple feet from my cot. They didn't look like boot marks or animal claws. They looked like poles dragged upright. Too thin, too far apart to be ski poles. Something off about them. I erased them with my boot and told myself to knock it off. After breakfast, I grabbed my day pack and took a smaller trail leading down into a ravine. I figured I'd explore a bit, get some air, come back before nightfall. But the trail started acting wrong. My map showed the path hugging the west ridge and looping back around. But 20 minutes in, I reached a fork that wasn't marked. No sign, no blaze, just a split. I chose the left branch because it climbed upward, and I wanted a view. After a short climb, I reached a ridge, only to see a fallen tree I'd passed earlier. My own boot tracks approached from the opposite direction. I hadn't turned around. The trail shouldn't have doubled back like that. It felt like the woods had shifted under me. I headed back to the cabin immediately. Dusk comes fast in that season. 1 second daylight, the next full shadow. Inside, I got another fire going and tried to journal about the weirdness. But my pen was gone. I always clip it to my notebook. I checked pockets, cot, pack. Nothing. An hour later, I found it jammed behind the stove. Deep behind the stove. Like something had pushed it back there. That night, just as I was about to lie down, I heard something above me. Up in the loft. Not footsteps. More like weight shifting. Slow. Careful. A soft drag against the wall, like someone rolling over in bed. There was no one up there. I didn't go look. Couldn't. Instead, I dragged the chair under the opening of the loft, sat facing upward with my boots still on and my headlamp clipped to my hat. Fire low. Eyes locked on the dark square above me. I didn't sleep at all. At sunrise, I packed my gear fast. I planned to hike out the same way, but there was an old fire road marked on my map, cutting diagonally across the ridge and shaving off a few miles. If I could find the start of it, I'd be back to the ranger station by evening. But nothing looked like it was supposed to. Landmarks I'd marked in my head the day before didn't line up. Trees felt rearranged. Clearings were in the wrong places. I'd see a marker, walk toward it, and then it would somehow be behind me. At one point I found a tree with a crisp notch in the bark. A clean tool mark. I circled around to look for more signs. When I looped around and came back to the same spot, I hit the same tree again, from a different angle, without ever turning. The trail wasn't curving. It was folding. By late afternoon, the sky had dropped into that bruised purple winter gets right before the sun bails completely. I should have been miles away by then, somewhere near the ridge road, maybe even close enough to hear a truck once in a while. But instead, I stepped out of a tight corridor of pines and found myself staring at the clearing. The clearing with the damn cabin. I just froze. I hadn't meant to come back here. I'd been walking away from this direction for hours, but there it was, quiet as ever, sitting dead center like nothing strange had happened at all. Smoke didn't rise from the chimney. The window was still nailed shut. Snow lay smooth around it, untouched. Except the door was open. Not wide, just cracked a few inches. Just enough to show it hadn't latched again. That did something cold to my stomach. I approached slow. Each crunch of snow sounded stupidly loud. The closer I got, the worse that sinking feeling got. Like stepping toward a mouth you just realized was open. Inside, everything looked the same at first glance. Same cot, same stove, still faintly warm from the morning fire. Nothing overturned. But the chair. The chair I'd dragged under the loft was now on the opposite side of the room, turned neatly toward the stove, like someone had been sitting there to watch the coals die. and my journal lay open on the cot. A sentence filled the page in handwriting that wasn't mine. Jagged letters, too sharp, like someone carved each stroke with a pocket knife. You shouldn't move the chair. I didn't touch a thing. Not the journal, not my pack, not even the door. I backed out, turned, and ran. Straight into the woods. I didn't look for a trail, didn't try to match anything on my map. I just ran downhill through brush and frozen weeds, falling twice, maybe 3 times, catching myself on roots and icy rocks. Branches slapped my face. My breath felt like it was ripping out of my throat. I kept hearing things behind me, snaps of branches, the whisper of something sliding against bark. But that might have just been panic clawing at my ears. I wasn't about to check. Eventually I hit a stream, wide enough that the snow hadn't covered the center. I followed it because at least water runs somewhere real, somewhere logical, somewhere man-made roads might cross. I stayed in the icy mud along the bank, slipping, stumbling, grabbing low branches so I didn't fall into the freezing current. Time blurred. Everything became noise. My breathing, my heartbeat, the suck of my boots in the slush. Eventually the stream widened and flattened into a clearing, and I saw a shape too square to be natural. A plow truck. I practically staggered toward it, waving like some wild-eyed lunatic. The guy in the cab saw me and opened the passenger door before I even reached him. I must have looked awful. Snow crusted on my hat, face red and raw, eyes wide. He didn't ask many questions, just said, "You look damn near frozen. Hop in." I climbed in and shut the door fast, terrified that something from the woods might slip in behind me. We started moving, the heater blasting warm air that felt unreal. After a minute, the driver shot me a side glance. "Get yourself turned around up there?" "Something like that," I managed. My voice felt scraped out of me. "Where were you staying?" "Firewatch cabin, past the ridge." I pointed vaguely over my shoulder. He gave this slow, uncomfortable look. "The old one?" "Yeah." He shook his head. "Buddy, that place burned down." I stared at him. No, it didn't. I slept in it 2 nights ago." He let out a breath like he didn't want to be having this conversation. "Chimney collapsed 2 winters back. Whole structure went up fast. Rangers marked it as unsafe. Nobody rebuilt anything. No one's allowed up that far anyway." My throat closed up. I wanted to argue, but every word died halfway. He kept driving. "Maybe you found the foundation," he said. "Sometimes folks mistake it for a standing cabin in the snow. Hard to tell what's what out there." I didn't answer. Couldn't. The ride back to the ranger station felt unreal, like moving through a dream where the walls don't stay still. When we got there, Rich wasn't at the desk, just a different ranger who checked me over and asked if I needed a medic. I said no. I signed out, my hands still shaking. I didn't look back toward the tree line. Didn't ask questions. Didn't mention the sentence in my journal. Didn't bring up the chair. I drove straight home and didn't tell a soul until now. Even writing this makes something in my chest twist, like the woods could still hear me somehow. Because the part I keep thinking about, the part I can't shake no matter how I try, isn't the noises in the loft, or the weird looping trail, or the fact that I stepped into a cabin that supposedly wasn't there. It's the marks by the door. Those 2 long, thin, dragging lines in the grit. They weren't pole marks. Not really. They were too smooth, too deliberate, too parallel. More like something tall had leaned its weight on the floor and pulled itself inside. And the more I picture that sentence written in my journal, the more I realize something. It wasn't warning me about the chair.
It was telling me I'd moved whatever was resting in it.
My cousin Lucas and I decided to hit the Tallow Ridge Loop in southern Kentucky, right after Christmas, late December, when the cold bites but doesn't quite kill. We'd done the same 2-day loop back in the fall and figured winter wouldn't be so bad if we packed smart. Lucas was training for some long Appalachian trek he wanted to brag about in the spring. I was just tired of my apartment smelling like stale radiator heat and old laundry. I needed open air. We parked by this sun-bleached forestry gate a little after noon and got moving. Nobody else was out there, just miles of frozen brush and that quiet winter air that feels heavy somehow. By the time the sun dipped low, we found a mostly flat patch off the trail and pitched the tent. We didn't talk much while gathering dead sticks and frozen limbs for the fire, mostly grumbling about fingertips burning from cold and how even boiling noodles felt like work. Lucas laughed once, saying if this was the warm-up for his big hike, he should probably start researching new life plans. We crashed early, hoping to sleep hard after the climb, but sleep didn't find me. For hours, I just listened to Lucas snoring like a busted chainsaw and watched the fog of my breath float inside the sleeping bag. The cold felt like it was inside my bones, vibrating. Around midnight I heard it. Little crunches in the snow outside. Not normal steps. More like shift, long pause, shift again. Not wandering, not frantic. Something careful. Something that didn't want to be caught making noise. I whispered Lucas's name, asked if he heard it. He muttered, "Probably deer, maybe coyotes," and rolled over. I didn't push him. A part of me wanted that explanation too. We tore down camp around sunrise. Sky clear, but the cold felt sharper. My fingers were so stiff I had to lace my boots twice because I messed it up the first time. We hit the trail at 8, lighter packs helping us move faster. About 3 miles in, Lucas suggested detouring to a place he called Cutter's Hollow. Not on any printed map, he said, but he'd read about it on some backwoods forum full of guys who brag about secret spots. He said real hikers knew about it. I didn't care either way, but he was buzzing, so I followed. When we reached it, something felt wrong immediately. The trees opened into this wide clearing, almost perfectly round. Not natural weird, but wrong weird. Dead quiet. No wind, no birds, no brush. Just stillness. Like walking into a muted room. In the center stood 3 stone columns. Tall, narrow, maybe 12 or 15 feet high. Natural rock, but shaped in a way that didn't feel natural. They stood far enough apart that someone could walk between them like doorways. The ground around them was flat and bare except for a thin skin of snow. No branches, no tracks, no scattered leaves. It felt empty, but not peaceful. More like something had cleared the place out and didn't appreciate visitors. Lucas got excited instantly. He loves weird rock stuff. Dropped his pack, grabbed his camera, and ran toward the stones like a kid at a carnival. I hung back at the tree line, stretching my legs and sipping water. That's when it happened. I was facing the woods, zoning out, when I felt someone step right up behind me. Not sound, weight. The snow compressed. The ground gave a little, and then 2 hands pressed down on my upper arms, one on each side. Not grabbing, just pressing, like someone leaning close to whisper something horrible. I lurched forward, heart slamming, and spun around ready to curse Lucas out. But no one was there. Nothing but empty snow and trees. Lucas was still kneeling by his tripod, head down, adjusting something on the camera. He hadn't moved at all. I froze. My arms still tingled where those hands had pressed, like the weird, numb, buzzing feeling when a foot falls asleep. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt real. Lucas finally looked up, saw me standing weird, and yelled, "You good?" I swallowed it down. Told him I was ready to keep moving. Didn't mention a thing. The rest of the hike felt wrong in ways I couldn't put into words. I kept checking the woods like something was walking just out of sight. The trail markers looked the same, but the turns felt too sharp, the rises too steep. Like the land had subtlety rearranged itself when we weren't looking. I tried blaming fatigue. That didn't explain why the same crow, or what looked like the same crow, kept circling above us every time we stopped. Or why the air never moved, even when we reached clearings where wind should have torn straight through. Lucas talked non-stop about gear, routes, and stupid details I couldn't focus on. My answers got shorter. I think he noticed. We made camp near a frozen creek bed that night. No wind, no rustling. Even the fire sounded quieter than it should have, like the entire place was wrapped in thick insulation. Sound went nowhere. My stomach knotted up. I forced down a few bites of food before giving up. Lucas asked if I felt sick. Maybe bad water. I told him I just needed sleep. When we crawled into the tent, I tightened my sleeping bag hood so only my nose and mouth poked out. I kept telling myself that if I could just make it through the night, I'd feel normal in the morning. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember exactly how I woke. Lucas shot upright with a loud gasp, this sharp, panicked inhale like someone dropping into ice water. Then he yelled, too loud for the tiny tent, "She's right there! Get the light!" I scrambled, half trapped in my sleeping bag, searching for my headlamp with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. When I finally clicked it on, I turned toward the door. Lucas sat rigid, staring at the tent fabric like it was torn open. His pupils huge, his face slick with sweat. I swung the beam across the tent. Nothing. Just fabric walls and our scattered gear. No tears, no shadows, no footprints. Lucas blinked like he'd just been yanked out of a nightmare. He wiped his face and whispered, "Sorry, dream. Just a dream." Then he lay down and passed out instantly, like someone had flipped him off. I didn't sleep at all. I sat awake, lamp still on, eyes locked on the seams of the tent, listening to the frozen silence claw at the nylon. I sat awake until the tent fabric began turning from black to a dusty gray. The cold felt worse than the night before, colder than the air temperature should have allowed. It felt like something breathing slowly against the tent, freezing everything it touched. When Lucas finally stirred, he acted like nothing had happened. He stretched, yawned, zipped his jacket. Same old Lucas. I watched him carefully, waiting to see if he'd mention the dream, the shout, the she. But he didn't. Not a flicker of memory crossed his face. We packed up and broke camp without much talking. The sky was flat and colorless, like it had been painted over with wet ash. As we hiked, I kept seeing something ahead of us. Not a shape, not a person, just movement. A shift in the line of trees, a ripple in the shadows, always too far to make sense of. We hit a ridge around midday. Stunning view on any other trip. Rolling hills, dark evergreens dusted in white, a horizon that stretched like forever. But I barely looked at it. Lucas stood near the cliff edge, taking it in like a postcard. Then he said, "Do you hear that?" I froze. Hear what? He kept staring into the tree line behind us. Someone's humming. I listened. Windless silence. "Lucas, nobody's out here." He shook his head like trying to clear water from his ears. "Just forget it." We continued down the ridge. Every few minutes, Lucas would glance over his shoulder as though someone was walking right behind him. I could feel it too, the sense of being followed. but not by something heavy, something light, patient. We crossed a small footbridge just before dusk. The creek below was frozen except for a thin sliver of moving water right in the center. As Lucas stepped off the far side, the wooden boards behind me creaked, like someone else was crossing. I turned so fast I nearly slipped. Nobody there, just empty bridge. But the boards still groaned under a weight that wasn't mine. I speed-walked to catch up with Lucas. Neither of us talked about it. By the time we set up our last camp, my hands were shaking so badly I kept dropping matches. Lucas finally took them away and lit the fire himself. He didn't joke, didn't tease, didn't say anything really. He kept staring into the dark woods, face blank, like he was trying to remember whether something was real or imagined. The fire felt too small. The tent felt too thin. And the whole forest felt like it was holding its breath. We ate in silence. Lucas chewed slow, like he was forcing every bite. When he finished, he said, "I don't think we should sleep long tonight." Something in his voice had changed. Not fear, conviction, like he knew something was coming. But we were exhausted and cold, and the fire wouldn't stay hot enough to keep us awake. Before long, we crawled into the tent again. The moment the zipper closed, I knew we'd made a mistake. The silence outside wasn't normal silence. It was aware. Too aware. Every sound we made inside the tent, every breath, every shift of fabric felt amplified, like the woods were listening closely. Waiting. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is snapping awake to the feeling of someone kneeling next to me. Not Lucas. He was on the other side of the tent. I could hear his breathing. This was closer. Inches away. The fabric of my sleeping bag tightened like someone had leaned onto it with both hands. I tried to move my arms. Couldn't. My chest seized like the air had turned solid. My breath came out in little panicked puffs. All I could do was stare at the tent ceiling, watching it pulse in and out as my heartbeat hammered. Then I heard it. A woman's voice. Not whispering words, not humming a tune, just the sound of breath, exhaling slow and low, like she was smelling me. The fabric brushed against my cheek from the outside, fingers dragging lightly downward. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even swallow. My entire body went numb in a cold that wasn't from winter. The dragging stopped. Silence. Then, Lucas shot upright again with the same terrified inhale from the night before. He fumbled for the tent zipper like he was drowning. The moment he opened it, the presence vanished. The cold pressure lifted off my chest. Lucas scrambled outside, barefoot in the snow, spinning around with wild eyes. She was right there, I swear, she was... His voice cut out. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. I dragged myself out of the tent, legs shaking. Lucas, look at me. Look at me. He didn't. He just stared into the trees, pupils huge, breath clouding fast and shallow. Then he whispered, "She knows your name." My stomach flipped. "What are you talking about? Who?" He pointed at the woods with a trembling hand. "She said it while you were asleep." I knew he wasn't lying. Lucas jokes, but he doesn't fake fear. Not this kind. We didn't talk after that. We didn't pack. We just grabbed what we could and started walking. No trail, no compass. Just moving, desperate to get away from that campsite, that ridge, those woods. The night felt endless. The trees started blending together in tight, unnatural rows. More than once we walked in circles, saw our own footprints returning like we'd been looping the same half-acre of forest. At some point, Lucas stopped responding to me. His steps grew sluggish. His head drooped. He kept looking over his shoulder with this empty, resigned expression, like he was listening to someone behind him. Just before dawn, when we finally saw the faint glow of a distant road through the trees, Lucas whispered, "She followed us." I didn't look back. I couldn't. We stumbled onto the roadside just as the first car rounded the bend. The driver rolled down the window, ready to ask if we were okay. But before he could speak, Lucas collapsed. He didn't wake up for almost 12 hours. When he finally did, he remembered the trail, the clearing, the cold. But nothing after that. Nothing about the woman. Nothing about the voice. Nothing about my name. Sometimes I think that's for the best. But sometimes, when I walk past a quiet room or see frost on a window pane that shouldn't be there, I swear I can hear something behind me. Breathing. Slow. Low. Patient. Like she never really stopped following. I took a week off from work, thinking I'd hide out somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody bothers you. I'd been doing solo hikes for about a year. Nothing heroic, just off-season trails where my phone has no bars and life slows down. That winter, I picked a lonely stretch of the lower Appalachians near a tiny forgotten town called Willow Pass. Out on that ridge was an old public cabin they kept unlocked all year for hikers who don't care about creature comforts. No lights, no plumbing, just a cranky wood stove, a sad little cot, and, though I didn't pay it any mind at the time, a bolted hatch sunk into the floor in one corner. I stayed 4 nights. First 2 nights were perfect. Quiet. Snow drifting like dust. Wind sliding through the trees like someone whispering far away. The whole place felt abandoned in a peaceful way, like I'd been dropped in a world that didn't need me. On the 3rd morning, things got weird. There were boot prints in the snow. Fresh ones. Except they didn't come from the trail. They started right at the tree line behind the cabin and marched straight toward the porch. Same size as my boots. Same tread. But they didn't go up the steps. They just stopped. Like whoever made them walked up to the place and vanished. No turnaround, no scuff, no misstep. Just a dead-end line of footprints. I stood staring for a long minute, working every possible explanation through my head. Maybe the snow melted weird overnight. Maybe shadows made them look sharper. Maybe I was overthinking. I even checked for animal tracks, just in case something stomped around and warped the snow. But the whole area was clean. Too clean. That night I locked up tighter than usual and dragged my sleeping bag into the far corner where the windows couldn't see me. I tried to think about anything else. Didn't work. Around 2 a.m., I heard a single footstep on the porch. Just one. Heavy. Wood groaning under something with weight. No knock. No second step. No shuffle. No breathing. Just that one sound hanging in the cold air like someone testing the board right outside the door. I didn't sit up. I didn't look. I barely breathed. I just stared at the dim ceiling, counting heartbeats until the sky got lighter. By morning, the prints were gone. Not faded, gone. The snow looked untouched, smooth as flour. Like nothing and no one had been there. I talked myself into hiking a side trail to clear my head. It was narrow, snaked behind the ridge, and the map didn't mention anything interesting. But about 2 miles in, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. A house. Or what was left of one. It leaned half-buried into the hillside. Roof caved in, windows punched out, stone foundation still holding like it refused to die. Looked ancient. Forgotten. A gnarled apple tree stood in the yard, bark black like rot, branches twisted like fingers reaching up. Everything around it, grass, brush, even the snow, looked dead. The snow was patchy there, like it refused to land too close. Curiosity wrecked my better judgment, so I slipped inside. It was colder than outside, way colder. The air felt like it came from a freezer left open too long. Frost buckled the floorboards. In the back room, busted chairs and table pieces were stacked in front of the fireplace like someone had tried to barricade it. Not the front door, the fireplace. In the corner, under a fallen beam, was a tiny coat. Kid size, floral pattern. Frozen stiff like it had been there for decades. I didn't touch it. Something about it felt wrong, like picking it up would feel too personal. And then I noticed the door. At the far end of the wrecked room, half buried under snowdrift, was a narrow door leading downward. The walls around it had long, dirty streaks running along them, drag marks, wide ones, like something big had been hauled down the steps. My heartbeat got loud. I stared into that dark stairwell for what felt like forever, then backed away slow. I wasn't brave. I was smart enough not to push my luck. Back at the cabin that night, the noise started again. But it wasn't outside this time. It was underneath. Gentle creaks at first, like someone shifting their weight on floorboards below me. Then a slow, dragging sound. Rhythmic, almost patient. That's when the hatch in the floor finally registered in my brain like a burning warning sign. I crawled over and touched the lock. The metal was so cold it bit into my skin. But what bothered me wasn't the temperature. It was the smell. Someone had oiled that padlock recently. Very recently. I didn't open it. I just sat with my back to the wall, staring at the hatch until dawn. By morning, I'd had enough. I packed everything and bolted out. But barely 100 feet down the trail, I stopped dead. The path was blocked. Not by random storm damage, by huge fallen limbs, tangled brush, stacked in a way that looked deliberate, almost arranged. None of it had been there the day before. I cut off trail, thinking I could loop around and pick up the path further down. Got maybe a mile before I heard footsteps behind me. Not mine. Heavy, uneven, like someone limping. Close. I stopped. They stopped. I turned. Nothing there. I walked again. The steps followed again. That happened twice, and on the third time I didn't wait. I ran. Not full panicked sprint, but fast enough that every breath felt scraped. I didn't stop until I saw the cabin through the trees. And even then, the dread stayed. That last night, I stayed fully dressed, pack zipped, boots on. I was done, just waiting for sunlight. But before sunrise hit, something reached for me. Something tugged my ear. Hard. Sharp. Like fingers pinching through cold air. I jerked around so fast, I knocked over the metal pan on the stove. Nobody there. Door locked. Hatch sealed. Empty room. Then I heard a crack. The old rocking chair in the corner, solid oak, heavy as hell, snapped in half. No pressure on it. No one near it. It just broke like something invisible sat down too hard. I didn't think. I grabbed my stuff and walked out into the freezing dark. I forced myself down the trail, even though every tree felt like it was leaning closer. My breath puffed out in shaky clouds, and every sound, every snap of ice, every branch shifting, felt like it belonged to something following me. It took me about 4 hours to hit the old fire access road, longer than it should have, but my nerves were shredded, and I kept looking over my shoulder like a kid in a bad movie. A delivery truck rumbled by, a beat-up rig that probably hadn't had an oil change since the 90s. The driver slowed down when he saw me, waved me over, and asked if I needed a ride. I didn't tell him anything. I just climbed in and stared out the window like something in the woods was going to sprint out after me. I think I said maybe 5 words the whole ride. Back in town, I rented a motel room with flickering lights and peeling paint, but it felt safer than that cabin ever had. I didn't sleep much, though. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw those footprints at the porch, perfectly cut in the snow, stopping like someone was still standing there. I heard that single step on the wood, and that tug on my ear, that sharp pinch like nails pressing into my skin. It replayed in my mind again and again. Weeks passed before I could even think about what happened without feeling sick. But eventually, curiosity won. Or fear. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. I dug around online, then checked county records, old newspaper scans, anything I could get my hands on. And that's when the whole thing twisted into something worse. The cabin had been built in the 70s by a man named Howard Drell. According to old Forest Service logs, he worked trails and fire lines most of his life. He retired out there with his wife. She had a long history of miscarriages, 8, maybe 9, from what the medical notes hinted at. But one winter, out of nowhere, she carried a baby to term. A daughter. The local paper had one picture. A tiny girl with dark hair and a heavy winter coat standing beside her father. Behind them was the same ridge I'd hiked. Same slope, same trees. It made my skin crawl. The article didn't say much, except that she died when she was 5. Fell from a tree behind the ridge after a snowstorm. Broke her neck instantly. They held a small funeral no one attended except the parents. His wife left town not long after. Went back to her extended family out west and stayed there. Howard stayed alone. Records say he isolated himself so completely that neighbors hadn't seen him for months. And then one winter morning, a hunter found him hanging from the same tree his daughter fell from. The same tree I walked by. The same ridge I crossed. After that, the cabin remained open for public use, but no one stayed there long. Some left entries in old trail logs about strange noises, doors moving on their own, footsteps outside the windows at night. One guy wrote about something watching from the hill. That page had water stains on it like someone spilled something trembling. Reading that stuff didn't comfort me. It just confirmed I hadn't imagined any of it. I kept thinking about the hatch, the oiled padlock, the sound beneath the floor. The way the footsteps behind me matched mine just enough to feel human and wrong at the same time. What bothered me most wasn't the prints or the house or even the rocking chair splitting in half. It was the ear tug. That tiny, sharp pinch felt intentional, personal, like a kid trying to get someone's attention. I tried to tell myself it was wind or static or just my nerves. But every time I touched that spot on my ear, it tingled deep under the skin, like the memory of fingers. Eventually, I convinced myself to go back to normal life. Work, groceries, bills, all the boring stuff that makes you feel grounded. But certain things stayed with me. I don't hike alone anymore, not even close. If a trail map says unmaintained, I skip it. If a cabin is listed as primitive, I pass. Winter hikes? Haven't done one since. Sometimes at night, when the house settles or the furnace kicks on, I hear a soft creak in the floorboards. And for a split second, my stomach drops like I'm back in that cabin, staring at that hatch, listening to something breathing slow beneath me. I keep telling myself it's nothing. Just sound. Just imagination. Just the past clinging to the present. But once in a while, late enough that the world feels thin. I swear I hear a single step on my porch. One, just one, heavy enough to make the boards shift. The same way it did that night. And every single time, I freeze. I don't go to the door. I don't check the window. I don't move. Because out there in the dark, past the porch light, I know there could be prints in the snow, stopping right at the steps, pointed at me, waiting. I don't ever look. I don't think I want to see if they're still the same size as mine. I was 23 when it went down. That winter just wouldn't quit, storm after storm, day after day. I was living in Harrington Mills, a tiny town that always felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the monotony. I waited for the last big snowfall to ease off, then packed light. Just my bivy sack, some freeze-dried meals, my stove, and a beacon in case the hike went sideways. I rolled up a utility road, just where the forest starts crowding the old ranger gate. My car was the only one for miles. Normally, that would have felt safe, but the stillness had a weight to it, sharp and strange. Not scary yet, just different. Snow blanketed everything, smooth and pure. Not a deer track, nothing. Only a few fallen branches and the skeletal frame of a half-buried deer blind, collapsed maybe a mile in. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about it looked freshly snapped, like the snow hadn't had time to cover it. Everything in winter looks new, but this felt wrong. My plan was simple. Climb to a rock ledge jutting from the northern ridge, a natural overhang that made a dry, quiet shelter. I'd slept there before. Nice view when the clouds cleared, dry ground and peace. Make camp, boil some food, sleep, and descend the next morning along a creek bed trail looping back to the main road. The hike up was eerily calm. No branches snapping underfoot, no rustle of wildlife, not even the whisper of wind in the treetops. At first, the silence felt sacred, almost comforting. But the longer I moved without a single sound, the wrongness crept in. No breeze, no chirping, no small forest noises. Just stillness, like the world had pressed pause. I told myself snow muffles everything, that's why people love walking in it. But this was different, compressed, like sound itself was being swallowed before it reached me. By the time I reached the ledge, the sun was already low. Hard to gauge time through the clouds. Snow played tricks on light, shading everything wrong. I boiled water, dumped it into a pouch of dehydrated chili that tasted like spicy cardboard, then crawled into my bivy bag. I drifted in and out of sleep, warm enough to rest but not deeply. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke. No sound, no dream, no reason. Just awake in a way that didn't feel natural. Skin tight, alert. My hands cold. I reached for my flashlight out of habit, but froze when I caught something from the corner of my eye. Tracks in the snow. The ledge offered a little overhang, so the snow hadn't reached where I was. But about 10 feet out, where the slope eased and trees spaced apart, I saw them. A line of marks crossing the road I'd hiked earlier. Not boot prints, not animal tracks. Stretched, claw-like impressions. Maybe a foot long each, with narrow drag lines behind, like something heavy had scraped along the surface. I tried to rationalize. Wounded elk, bear dragging a limb. But spacing was wrong. Symmetry too clean. Only one set. No approach, no retreat, just one long passage across the snow. I didn't move. Just stared as light flakes drifted down, barely visible in the dark. The track slowly faded under the new layer, turning into shadows rather than prints. I didn't unzip my bag. Didn't move. Waited until first light. Morning came, gray and dull. No breakfast. Packed silently and started moving fast. Doubling back didn't feel right. The logical side of me screamed to follow the familiar trail, but some deep, instinctive voice said, "Don't go that way." So, I took the longer route. A steep drop into a ravine following a frozen creek toward the highway. Messy terrain, but manageable. By mid-morning, sun peaked enough to warm slightly. Snow fell in clumps from the trees, wet and heavy. I kept my hood up, eyes down, cautious of slick ice. The trail narrowed between boulders, and then I saw them again. Same tracks, same stretch, same claw-like drags. Crossing the path just ahead, no preceding or following marks, no sign of approach or departure. Just a fresh line 30 feet ahead. Fresh. No wind had covered them, no snow softened them. Minutes old at most. I crouched, heart hammering, studying the impressions. You could see the ends pressed like nails or claws. Not animal claws, too narrow, almost delicate, but strong. Drag marks deeper, cut into the snow as if whatever made them had shifted full weight forward. I stood, adrenaline surging, and veered off trail without a second thought. No more analysis, no more guessing. I needed out. Steep slope down to the creek. Grabbed roots, branches, anything to keep upright. Slipped a few times, bruised a wrist catching myself. Didn't care. Chest tight with that growing pressure, that sense of eyes watching. I moved fast, afraid stopping would mean I'd be seen. In the creek bed, I stayed in the middle, ice thin in spots, but moving water underneath gurgling faintly. A small reminder life still existed here. And then I noticed the rock. A flat boulder jutting from the ravine wall. On top, 2 handprints in the snow. Wrong. Too long, stretched fingers, too many joints, pressed deep as if someone had braced there. No approach or exit marks. Just those prints, perfectly formed, then vanished. That's when I stopped trying to explain it. No rationality left. I ran, tripped, scrambled, grabbed anything to stay upright. Legs cramping, lungs burning, didn't care. Straight down the ravine until asphalt appeared through the trees. Reached the roadside, kept moving, no pause, no phone check. Standing still felt worse than anything. Signal returned at the edge of town. I didn't call anyone. Walked straight home, locked doors, and spent hours in the shower until the hot water ran out. Even now, I can't shake it. I never saw the thing. Not a flicker. Not a shadow. For weeks, I checked ranger logs, message boards, hoping someone else had caught it. Nothing. Until a month ago. Digging through old forestry archives at Ashwood Regional Library, I found a 1978 inspection report. Routine winter check, erosion near abandoned shafts. Normal. Until the last page. Odd symmetrical depressions, snow patterns inconsistent with any known species. Margin note in pen. Recurs mid-inter-ridge 12, not elk. Ridge 12. The same stretch I camped on. The last solo hike I ever took. Even thinking about that hike makes my chest tighten. After seeing that note, I couldn't shake the memory of the tracks, the handprints, or that suffocating silence. Something out there wasn't meant to be understood. And yet, curiosity kept clawing at me, even weeks later. I avoided Ridge 12 for months, sticking to busy trails near town. But eventually, I couldn't resist the pull of winter. I wanted to see if I'd imagined it, if anything could explain what happened. So, I went back, but only to the outskirts, staying in the thicker woods and never touching the ledge again. That morning, the sky was a dull gray, heavy with the threat of snow. The air smelled sharp, cold and metallic, like iron in frost. The utility road was silent, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. I took a small detour into the tree line, eyes constantly scanning. No animals, no wind, not even the usual whisper of branches brushing together. Just stillness, thick enough to choke on. I followed a shallow drainage, hoping to loop closer to where the ledge had been. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Stretched, claw-like, exactly the same as before. A single line. No approach, no retreat. They led across a frozen patch of earth and vanished into nothing, leaving the snow untouched beyond them. I froze, heart hammering. Every rational thought screamed to leave, but I couldn't. I knelt, tracing the edges with a gloved finger. The snow felt hard, almost glassy, impossibly precise. Whoever or whatever made them had incredible control. My gut twisted. I backed away slowly, shaking, until I slipped on ice and fell hard. The fall was minor, but my panic spiked. I scrambled up and pressed on, desperate to put distance between me and whatever had left the marks. The creek came into view, snaking through the ravine like a frozen vein. I stayed in the center, the ice cracking underfoot, water gurgling faintly below. It felt alive, reassuring in a way. And then I noticed it. A wide, flat boulder jutting from the opposite wall. The same spot as last time. 2 handprints pressed into the snow. Not deep, not faint. Like someone had leaned there and vanished. Fingers impossibly long, knuckles protruding unnaturally. The snow around them was untouched, no climb marks, no evidence of a path. Just the prints, perfectly braced, as though the world itself had paused to hold them there. I didn't approach, didn't want to see if they'd move. My instincts screamed to run, but I stayed frozen, trembling. The silence pressed down so hard it made my teeth chatter. Every instinct told me I wasn't alone. I bolted, legs trembling, slipping on ice, snow digging into my palms. Branches slapped my face, roots snagged my boots, but I didn't slow. The sensation of being watched grew heavier with every step, like eyes pressing into the back of my skull. My chest ached, heart hammering so loud I thought it might burst. I stumbled into the lower forest, and finally reached a small clearing where a utility road met the woods. Asphalt, civilization, safety. I didn't stop walking until I saw the edge of Harrington Mills, until familiar buildings loomed like lifeboats. Only then did I allow myself to slow, letting my lungs work over hours of panic. My phone had signal again, but I didn't call anyone. No words could make sense of what I'd just seen. Back at my apartment I paced, replaying every moment. The tracks, the handprints, the frozen boulder. Nothing natural fit. I combed through old forestry reports online, message boards, ranger logs. Nothing. Until the Ashwood Regional Library archives, the 1978 file. The last page kept me up for nights. Odd symmetrical depressions in snow, patterns no known animal could make. And in the margin, handwritten, recurs mid-inter Ridge 12, not elk. Ridge 12, the stretch I had camped on, the stretch I had fled. The words haunted me more than the sight of the prints. Not elk, not animal, not natural. Something else. Something deliberate. Something that left marks no one could trace, then vanished. I stopped hiking alone after that. Avoided winter trails entirely. I stick to crowded paths, sunny days, familiar forests. Even then I'm jumpy. Every creak of floorboards, every shadow crossing the road makes me flinch. My dreams are restless. Dragging prints, stretched fingers, and the snow swallowing tracks like they were never there. Even months later, I can close my eyes and see it. The single line of tracks disappearing into the blank white. The handprints pressed into the boulder. The silent forest holding its breath as though it's watching, waiting. No one else ever reported anything. Not a hiker, not a ranger. Nothing. That stretch of Ridge 12 remains quiet. Empty. Almost too perfect. Too precise. As if someone, or something, is still out there, keeping the forest in order. And me, remembering. I tell people I don't hike solo anymore. I tell them I avoid winter entirely. But I know the truth. That place isn't gone. And the moment I let my guard down, the tracks could appear again. Perfect and deliberate. Staring at me. Waiting for the next person foolish enough to step into their path. Sometimes, when the wind presses cold against my windows and the world feels hollow, I swear I can hear it. A faint scraping in snow. Nothing solid, just a rhythm. One line, stretching across the ground. Leading nowhere. Leading to me. And that's why I never go back. That's why Ridge 12 is off limits in my mind forever. Because whatever made those marks doesn't leave a trail. Doesn't retreat. Doesn't vanish for good. It waits. Watching. Patient. I haven't been back. And I never will. I was 31 when it all went down. Back when solo hikes were just another weekend plan for me. That last stretch I picked was supposed to be easy enough. Old fire roads, a few beaten-down trails, maybe a crumbling shelter or two if I needed it. The kind of place where GPS is optional and you rely on memory and faint landmarks. That morning, I passed a faded trail marker nailed to a warped wooden post. The arrow pointed left. The base of the post splintered like someone had kicked it. That was the end of any properly maintained trail. Beyond it, everything was just rough paths, informal cut-ins from old maps people uploaded online years ago. My plan was simple. Follow the ridge north, hit Larkspur Creek by dusk, camp there, and loop back the next morning. Around 3 in the afternoon, I reached a fork in the trail. One path curved with the ridge, exactly as my map showed. The other ran straight, just a faint line cutting through the snow. Nothing else, no footprints, no clear signs of use. But the trees leaning over it gave me pause. They curved in unnaturally, almost like someone had guided them there, framing the path. I don't know why I went down that line. Curiosity, probably. Boredom. You stare at the same snow-laden trees long enough, oddities start to feel interesting. I told myself I'd give it 15 minutes. If it led nowhere, I'd turn back. The trail dropped a bit in elevation, quickly narrowing. It felt abandoned, like no one had set foot here for years, yet it was still just enough of a path to hint it had once mattered. I sidestepped a few fallen branches, careful not to twist an ankle. And then I saw them. Footprints. Fresh. Perfectly imprinted in the snow, like someone had passed through less than an hour ago. I knelt, trying to figure out what kind of boot had left them. But the shape was wrong. Square at the heel. Uniform. Too clean and sharp. Whoever left these prints had clearly been trying to look like they were wearing boots. But something about them was off. The stride was too long, way longer than mine. I'm 6 feet tall, and these steps looked like someone twice my size had walked here without slipping. I stared at them for far too long, my gut knotting tighter by the second. Then I called out, low, not loud enough to echo far, just enough for someone close to hear. Silence answered. Nothing. Just the whisper of wind through the blackened trees. Against my better judgment, I kept moving. It wasn't a conscious choice. My legs just followed. The footprints led for a while before suddenly veering straight off the trail and disappearing into the trees. No hesitation, no turning, just a straight line into the undergrowth. I stopped, my mind catching up to my body. That wasn't natural. It felt deliberate, too neat, too perfect. Something in my chest twisted into ice. That was when I finally decided to turn back. The trail behind me looked the same, but everything felt wrong. Not dramatically wrong, just unfamiliar. I retraced my steps toward where I thought the shelter marker had been. It was gone. Nothing left. No post, no carving, no indication it had ever been there. Just a rough ring of stones poking up through the snow. They didn't look natural, more like someone had arranged them, haphazard but intentional. One side of the ring was broken, as if kicked or pushed open. My hands were numb from digging around, so I gave up and checked my compass. It pointed due south. That would have been fine, except the ridge was supposed to run west. I rotated it in my hand, tapped it once. Still south. Suddenly, everything behind me felt wrong. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just turned around. That happens, especially in snow. I chose a direction that felt right and moved forward. The sun was starting to drop, the world a washed-out palette of gray sky, white snow, and black trees. I pushed on until a clearing opened ahead. That's when things got really strange. Footprints in the center. My own. No one else's, just mine. Same tread, same wear, same subtle drag of my left heel. I hadn't been here before. I swear I hadn't. The tracks led straight to a small pile of branches in the clearing. A messy stack, like someone had gathered it but never lit a fire. The prints stopped there. No turns, no retracing. Nothing. I backed out, heart thumping, and climbed again, hoping elevation would give me perspective. Snow thickened around me, legs growing tired. I reached a small ridge, looked down, and saw the clearing again. The pile of branches. The footprints. Exactly the same as before. And I hadn't walked in a circle. I had climbed straight. Dread settled in behind my ribs, slow and insistent. I made camp on that ridge, pitching my tent as fast as I could. I didn't even cook, just crawled into my bag, trying to preserve warmth. Temperature dropped hard, low 20s or colder. Wind brushed branches against the tent, soft taps that kept me alert. Around 3 a.m., a new sound. A zipper. Outside. Too far for a tent flap caught in the wind. Slow, deliberate unzip. Then silence. My body stiffened. I didn't move, didn't breathe for what felt like a full minute. Morning light finally came through the tent wall. I crawled out, knees stiff, boots frozen. 30 feet away, another tent. Same model, same make, same patch I'd sewn on mine last year after a squirrel chewed the mesh. It wasn't zipped up. Inside were boots, my boots. Scuffed toe, frayed loop, same laces. But the snow around it was untouched. No footprints, no drag marks. Like it had just appeared. I didn't touch it. I didn't look further inside. I packed up silently, left without eating, and didn't look back. I didn't pause after leaving that ridge. My pace was fast, almost stumbling over roots and ice, heart hammering in a rhythm that felt like it could tear my chest open. The trail down the slope toward Larkspur Creek seemed longer than it should have been, every shadow in the trees twisting into shapes that weren't there. I kept my hood up, hands tight on the straps of my pack, eyes scanning the snow for anything that moved, or had moved. By mid-morning, the slope opened into the creek bed. Ice stretched in patches over the water, thin in some spots, thick in others, groaning faintly as it shifted under its own weight. I stayed right in the center, thinking the sound of running water would mask footsteps if someone or something followed me. My legs were aching, calves tight, but adrenaline kept me moving. Then I saw it. A boulder jutting from the creek wall, maybe 10 feet high. Snow blanketed its surface, but the top bore something impossible. 2 handprints. At first glance human, but wrong. The fingers were elongated, too many joints, pressing deep into the snow, bracing as if whoever left them had just materialized there. There was no sign of climbing, no marks leading up or down. Just those prints, impossibly perfect, as if someone had appeared out of nowhere, pressed themselves into the snow, and vanished. I froze, chest tightening, stomach twisting. Logic abandoned me. I didn't want to rationalize. I wanted distance. I scrambled down the creek bed, gripping ice-coated roots, branches, anything to keep from sliding. My palms were raw from gripping rough bark, wrists stinging from a few scrapes. But I didn't stop. The forest seemed alive in a way it hadn't before. Every faint crack of ice, every creak of a bough made my skin crawl. I imagined shapes slipping between the trees, silent, watching. My breaths came fast, fogging in the cold air, and I felt like even that sound could give me away. Snow was falling lightly now, the flakes coating every surface, muffling everything but amplifying the feeling that I wasn't alone. I kept my eyes down, focused on the creek and the trail beneath it, but couldn't escape the sense of being stalked. Every once in a while, I'd glance up, thinking I saw something shift, tall, thin, moving with impossible stillness between the trunks. Every time, though, when I looked again, there was nothing. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. I stumbled onto a small, cleared area near the main road. It wasn't a proper trailhead, just a patch where trucks and forest workers sometimes turned around. And then I saw a vehicle, a beat-up pickup parked with its engine idling. The driver waved me over, probably seeing the terror on my face. I climbed in without saying a word. The cab smelled of diesel and wet wool. The driver, a middle-aged man with a weathered face, didn't ask much. Just drove, keeping an eye on the road. I told him where I'd been hiking, stumbling over my words. He gave a look, the kind that makes you want to shut up. "You mean the old Larkspur shelter trail?" he asked. "The one they shut down years ago after that winter accident?" I blinked, confused. "No, it was still there. I stayed near the ridge." He shook his head. "Nah, that place burned down decades back. Nobody's been up there for years. Only stories now." I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The truck rumbled on, and the forest faded behind me, replaced with the gray, lifeless roads of town. Weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I started digging into old forestry records, accident reports, anything about that stretch of ridge. That's when I found it. In the late 70s, a ranger reported odd symmetrical depressions in the snow near abandoned fire roads. He noted patterns inconsistent with any known animal. Someone added in the margin, "Recurred mid-inter-ridge 12, not elk." Ridge 12, the same place I'd camped, the same path where the prints had appeared. I pored over the archives, old handwritten reports, photos of burned-out shelters and collapsed markers. There were notes about hikers vanishing, strange noises, footprints that appeared and disappeared. Every reference pointed to the same ridge, the same corridor I had walked. No one else could explain it, and there were no living witnesses. At least, none who stayed sane. After that, I never hiked solo again. I stick to warmer months now, trails with other people around, cell service if possible. Snow and silence are no longer peaceful. They're dangerous. I can still see the prints sometimes when I close my eyes. Those elongated hands pressing into the snow. The tracks that lead straight to nowhere. I'll never forget how quiet it was, how nothing moved, and yet I felt the weight of a presence heavier than any person could carry. Even now, I hear the soft dragging sometimes in my dreams, the way the snow shifts like it's alive. That winter taught me something I can't unlearn. Some parts of the forest aren't meant to be walked alone. Not in snow, not in silence. The ridge waits, and if you stare too long, it'll let you know you're there. I still hike, but I'm never alone, never after dusk, and never near Ridge 12. There's a line between the living and whatever presses itself into the snow, and crossing it, even once, is a mistake you can't fix. I was 20 when it all went down. There's this stretch up Mason Ridge I used to hit with my cousin Clay. We'd done it a few times before, usually late fall when the crowds were gone but the trails weren't frozen solid. That year, it was early December. No snow yet, just that sharp cold that hangs in your lungs and makes your boots crunch over frost-bitten leaves. I'd just gotten home from college for the break, my brain fried from finals, desperate for something to snap me out of the fog. Clay called me up, said, "Let's hit Bone Ridge this weekend." I didn't even think twice. Threw some layers into a pack, grabbed my gear, and met him the next morning. We parked his old truck just off a gravel logging road, maybe 5 miles in. No signs, no markers, just a gate half rotted away. The first few hours were quiet, real quiet. That kind of deep, thick forest silence where your thoughts finally catch up with you. We barely spoke. The hush was almost soothing. Around mid-afternoon, though, something threw us off. We stumbled into a clearing we didn't remember seeing before. About 30 yards across, ringed with pines, and in the center, the remains of a collapsed shack. We circled it slowly, senses tense. Clay crouched down, ran his fingers over the frost-laden soil. Long drag marks carved into the dirt, deep lines like something heavy had been yanked out of the wreckage and hauled away. I remember the look on his face. Not fear, just that cold edge of unease. After that, the air itself felt off. We didn't linger. Moved quicker, boots crunching over the leaves. We camped a mile from the old tower, wedged the tent between 2 spruce trees, and set a tiny fire. It barely gave off heat in the hard chill, but it kept the darkness from pressing too close. Clay got the stove running, but he stayed quiet. Even when I teased him about ghosts or chains, he just nodded, murmuring, "Yeah, weird." Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of steady crunching outside the tent. Not snaps or twigs, but heavy, deliberate footsteps. Pausing, then moving in wide arcs around our sight. I whispered, "Clay, you hear that?" He didn't turn, just mumbled, "Don't get up, it's fine." That was it. Silence until morning. When daylight broke, Clay was off. Barely touched his food, eyes scanning the trees like he expected something to lunge out at any second. I cracked a dumb joke about the ghost of the chain man. He just stared at me, pale-faced. "Not funny," he said. I shut up after that. By mid-morning, we made it to the tower. Same rusted metal, broken stairs, blackened base. But the place felt wrong. Too still. No birds, no wind. Even the clouds hung unnaturally still. Clay looked around for a beat, then muttered, "We shouldn't be here." We didn't. Heading back, we passed another clearing and froze. Something new had appeared. A neat stack of rocks, knee-high, smack in the middle of the trail. On top, a curled piece of bark blackened by frost. Scratched into it, jagged letters. Do not run. I swore it was Clay messing with me, but when I looked at him, he was pale, lips pressed tight. Wasn't here yesterday, he whispered. He snapped a photo, then kicked the pile over. After that, we moved fast, barely talking. The trail twisted strangely now. Landmarks repeated, the same crooked stump, the same fallen log, the same jagged rock jutting like a broken tooth. I swear I passed the same tree 3 times. No forks, no loops. We weren't going backward, but we weren't going forward either. Clay's compass spun wild. Mine refused to load. Around 4 o'clock, we stopped. The forest went completely silent. Not even our boots made a sound. Clay froze, eyes wide. Don't move, he whispered. My gaze followed his. 20 feet off, a figure in the trees. A man, or something pretending to be one. Barefoot, shirtless, gray skin like old parchment, standing at a crooked angle. Head tilted, arms hanging way too low. He wasn't facing us fully, but I knew he saw us. I didn't breathe. Clay's voice quivered. Don't run. We backed slowly, eyes locked on him. The trees swallowed him, but 15 minutes later he reappeared, closer, same pose, same tilt. Watching. Clay snapped. He bolted into the woods, crashing through branches. I couldn't move. Silence swallowed everything. Then I felt it. Breathing. Right behind me. Steady, warm, fogging my ear if I'd been standing still. I spun. Nothing. No one. The ground, though. It was changed. Frost cracked in long, wide shapes. Bare, human-like, but unnaturally stretched. Circling where I had been standing. I didn't run. I walked, one careful foot after another. Then I saw it again. The rock stack, rebuilt, taller. The bark, scratched over. Same warning, chilling in the frost. I didn't touch it. I didn't stop. 2 hours later, I stumbled back to the truck. Clay's voice drifted once through the trees, soft, smooth, wrong. Hey, over here. I didn't respond. At the truck, his boots sat by the driver's door. No pack, no trace, just the boots. I waited until sunrise, locked the doors, and didn't sleep. The next day, search and rescue came. I gave them the route, coordinates, and photos. They found nothing. Told me the snowfall probably buried everything. After that day, I never hiked Mason Ridge the same way again. The memory kept replaying, like a scratched record. But a few weeks later, I felt the pull again. My curiosity didn't die. I told myself I just wanted to see the ridge in daylight, to prove my mind hadn't tricked me. I went back, solo this time. Parked at the same gravel road. The air had that same biting December edge, boots crunching over frost-stiff leaves. At first it was quiet, peaceful even, like the forest hadn't moved since my last visit. I followed the familiar tracks toward the first clearing, scanning every tree, every shadow. Nothing moved. No footprints, no wind, just that eerie hush. I reached the second clearing, the one with the rebuilt rock stack. My stomach sank. It was taller than before. The bark on top was blackened by frost again, scratched with new letters. Stop looking. I froze. My heart pounded like a jackhammer. Something in me wanted to bolt. I didn't. I couldn't. The forest seemed to hum, the air thick, almost alive. Every step I took, I felt it behind me, watching. Not moving, but present. I tried to rationalize it, Maybe someone else had been there, a prankster or a lost hiker. But nothing about the tracks made sense. They were fresh but unnatural, too long, too perfect, with drag marks like something massive had been forced across the snow. No prints leading away, just the marks where it had appeared and vanished. I pressed on, following the ridge. My boots sank slightly into the frost. Every now and then, I would see a shadow flicker between the trees, just out of the corner of my eye. I stopped looking directly. The last time I had done that, it had appeared closer. The trail narrowed as the ridge curved. That's when I saw them again. The same elongated prints. They weren't walking. They were dragged, perfectly spaced, as if someone or something had been lifted off the ground and laid down step by step. They crossed the path right in front of me, heading toward a small stand of pines. I froze, my breath steaming in the cold air. A low creaking sound came from somewhere above, like a branch bending under weight. I turned my head slowly. Nothing. Then I saw the shadow, a shape taller than any man, its arms hanging too long, fingers brushing the snow. It didn't move, not like a person would. It just existed. I could feel its gaze pressing down, heavy, tangible. Panic whispered at the edge of my mind, but I forced myself to keep walking. No running. Not yet. One step at a time. Each crunch of my boots felt deafening in the unnatural quiet. I reached a small ledge overlooking the creek below. There was a wide, flat rock, and on it, handprints. Huge, human-like, but stretched beyond normal proportions. The fingers were too long, joints bending wrong, pressed deep into the snow. But there were no other marks. No way up, no approach, nothing. Just the prints, like the being had appeared and vanished instantly. My stomach churned. I didn't want to look down, didn't want to confirm that something beyond reason had left them. I turned back uphill, tried to keep the rhythm of walking, trying to calm my chest that was hammering like it wanted to break ribs. The ridge grew steeper, the snow thicker. My legs burned. The wind picked up, tugging at my layers, scratching against my face like fingernails. I kept moving, refusing to stop. Every now and then, I caught movement behind the trees, but when I spun around, there was nothing. Then I heard a sound that made me freeze in place. It wasn't footsteps. Not quite. More like breathing. Deep, rhythmic, and low. Close. Too close. I didn't dare look. My muscles locked. When I finally forced myself to turn, nothing was there. But the snow told a story. Around my boots, the frost was disturbed. Not by me, not by boots, not by paws, but by something wide, flat, and long. Circling me. Every step I had taken was mirrored in strange, unnerving arcs. I didn't run. I walked, fast, careful. But the feeling of being followed never left. It pressed in from all sides, whispering through the branches, moving in ways that didn't make sense. Hours passed, though I couldn't tell exactly. Sunlight waned, sky a washed gray. The ridge ended, dropping toward the road. I could see asphalt below, safety close. Relief surged, but caution stayed. When I hit the roadside, I didn't stop. Didn't check my phone. Just kept moving toward town. My boots were silent on the snow-packed gravel, and I could feel the weight behind me, the air still vibrating with its presence. Back in Garver's mill, I locked the door, checked the windows, even slid a chair against the door. I sat in the shower, hot water running until it went cold, trying to scrub the chill from my skin. The memory of those prints, the towering figure, the whispering frost, it clung to me. Weeks later, curiosity drew me to the Ashwood Regional Library. I was digging through old forestry logs, year-old inspection reports, anything about the ridge. Most files were boring, routine. Then I found a document from 1978, a winter inspection. Erosion checks, abandoned mining shafts, standard stuff. But the notes at the end froze me. The ranger wrote about strange symmetrical depressions in the snow, markings inconsistent with any wildlife. In the margin, scrawled in pen, recurs mid-inter Ridge 12, not elk. Ridge 12. The same stretch I'd camped and seen the prints. That was the last solo hike I ever took. I haven't been back. I haven't even hiked in that area again. Every time I pass snow in the woods, I see those elongated tracks. And I know, whatever it is, it's patient, waiting for the next fool to wander too close. We were just about 2 miles from the summit, if the trail marker was telling the truth. Most of the brutal climb was behind me, and I figured I'd reach the ridge before the last light faded completely. My sister Tessa was trailing a bit behind. She's never been a fan of switchbacks and didn't mind me going ahead to start unpacking our gear. That day, we picked a trail neither of us had tried before. It cut through a quiet corner of Carling County, a tucked-away stretch that never made it into any tourist maps. We parked just off a frozen service road around 6 in the morning. Not a single car, not a single footprint in the snow. That was the point. We wanted the world to shut up, to let us disappear for a while. The trailhead was slushy, partially iced over. Not ideal, but the ranger we had spoken to earlier that week swore it was passable. Said someone had made the hike 2 days prior and had no issues. We started our climb. By the time I reached the ridge, the wind had turned sharper, cutting through my layers. The light hung low and golden, shadows stretching like fingers across the uneven trail. The clearing I'd picked on the topo map was technically there, but it wasn't what I expected. The ground sloped oddly, dipping into a shallow basin. Not the nice flat patch I had hoped for, but I figured I could stake the tent if I worked at it. I've camped on worse. As I stepped into the clearing to check the spot, something felt off. I glanced back at my footprints to see how much the snow had compacted. Nothing. The trail I'd just climbed was pristine, untouched. No marks at all. I backtracked a few feet, still nothing. And then, for a fleeting second, I thought I saw movement near the bottom of the basin. Something low and quick, slipping behind a bent tree. I froze. I stared, trying to make sense of it. Nothing. Just brush, snow, rocks. I told myself it was the wind. My eyes were tired. Tessa arrived 10 minutes later, cheeks pink, slightly annoyed that I'd stopped in such a slanted spot. We had a little argument, playful irritation born from cold and exhaustion. I mentioned the shape I thought I saw. Maybe a deer, maybe a coyote. She didn't react much. "Great," she said. "Let's hope it doesn't wander near camp." Then she went to set up the tent. We pitched the tent, boiled a small pot of rice and beans, and zipped ourselves in before the sky lost every hint of color. The temperature dropped fast. The inside of my sleeping bag felt colder than normal, like it had been left out in the snow all night. I chalked it up to fatigue. Around 9, I slipped out to use the bathroom. Flashlight in hand, I scanned the basin. That darkness below the trees wasn't just nightfall. It looked flat, like the bottom had vanished. The kind of black that makes your chest tighten. The kind that feels bottomless. My flashlight barely cut through it. I stepped closer, maybe 20 feet. That's when I saw them. Tracks in the snow. Not ours. Not human. Not animal. Wide, flat, blunt at the ends. Almost like hooves, but too round. about 6 inches across, not spaced like walking but more like bounding. They crisscrossed the basin, appearing and disappearing in patterns that made no sense, jumping or teleporting just a few feet at a time. The last prints led right toward our gear, stopping just a few feet from the tent. I scanned the clearing. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. I rushed back and shook Tessa awake. She groaned and tightened her bag around her. I told her about the tracks. She barely opened her eyes. "If it's not a bear or a person, it doesn't matter," she said. "Tracks freeze weird." I didn't argue. I zipped up and lay there, listening. I expected twigs snapping, snow crunching, anything. Nothing. Pure stillness. When dawn broke, the prints were gone. The snow hadn't melted. It was smooth, untouched, as if the tracks had never existed. We packed up quickly. Tessa said she hadn't slept well and wanted to skip the summit. I didn't argue. I didn't mention my boots, wet through the heels, soaked despite being zipped in the vestibule. The flap had been zipped tight when we went to bed. The trail down was clearly marked and easy, but I kept checking the GPS. 40 minutes in, we hadn't left the ridge. The screen showed us in the same spot. I thought it was lag until we passed a dead birch, split down the center like a wishbone. I remembered pointing it out on the way up. Tessa froze. She said we already passed it. We stood there. The markers were all right. The GPS was pointing the correct way. But the landscape felt wrong, folding in on itself. We started walking faster. A mile later, we hit a fork. 2 trails, both soft angles. One dipped into pine, one stayed flat. Neither had signage. Neither had been there yesterday. I was about to joke about flipping a coin when Tessa stiffened, staring at a snowbank. There was a set of prints. Same shape, same spacing. Snow hadn't been pressed into. They looked like they had grown around the shape, formed into it. We took the other path. It straightened almost immediately, the trees opening a little. I let myself hope. Then Tessa froze again. Ahead, in a small clearing, was our tent. Set up, intact, just sitting there. We hadn't turned around. We hadn't doubled back. The trail had been straight. I approached slowly, unzipped the tent. Sleeping bag still half zipped, gloves on top. I picked mine up, warm. Tessa stepped back. "We're leaving. Now," she said. We didn't speak, just walked. Direction? Unknown. GPS refused. The forest repeated itself, crooked trees, bent pines, familiar fallen branches. 3 times. Eventually, a clearing. A rotted post, nail holes, rusted bracket. 4 trails split off, each identical. Air heavy. Legs aching, fingers numb. Tessa pointed to one. "It's this one." How? She had already been down the others. Her voice, wrong. I followed, silent. Another hour passed. Then pavement, Route 211. Frosted green sign. Our car, 50 feet away. Covered in frost, untouched. We got in, turned the heat on. Said nothing until halfway back to town. Even after we got home, the unease didn't leave. Tessa stayed quiet for hours, just staring out the window, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. I couldn't sleep either. Every time my eyes closed, I saw the blackness in that basin, felt the weight of the unseen eyes watching. The way the prints had appeared and disappeared, it didn't make sense. It shouldn't have happened. For the next week, I avoided the woods entirely. Every little noise outside made me jump. Every shadow seemed to flicker with something human-shaped. I kept thinking about the trail, the way it had folded in on itself, how the tent had been exactly where we left it even though we hadn't backtracked. The forest had tricked us, and I wasn't sure if it was alive or something else. I went back the following weekend, alone this time. Something stupid about closure, I guess. I parked in the same lot at dawn. The snow had fallen again, blanketing the trail, wiping it clean like a reset button. My boots crunched quietly as I followed the path to the ridge. Nothing unusual at first. But when I reached the clearing, my stomach flipped. The basin was empty. But the prints had returned. Not mine this time. Not human. Not animal either. Wide, flat, hoof-like, looping back and forth, bounding, appearing and vanishing mid-stride. It was a perfect loop, a twisted circle that covered the clearing from edge to edge. The snow around them untouched, no drag marks. Whoever or whatever made them hadn't walked. It had manifested. I froze, staring at the tracks. My heartbeat thudded so loud I could hear it echo in the crisp air. The wind was still, almost too still. I whispered into the void. "Hello?" No response, not even a rustle. But then I heard it. A faint snapping, soft, deliberate. Not branches falling naturally, something large, moving slow, careful. Something circling the clearing, just outside the tree line. I didn't turn. I didn't move. I just watched the prints. Then I felt it. Heat. Faint, like someone had breathed next to my ear. The kind that makes your skin crawl. I turned slowly. Nothing. The clearing was empty. But the feeling stayed, coiling tight in my chest. I tried to take a step back. Footsteps followed, light, almost careful. The snow didn't mark them. They just existed. I ran, not in panic, but in a controlled, desperate hurry. Down the slope, past the trees, toward the service road. Every time I looked back, I thought I saw a shadow, a pale angle of something humanoid, half in the trees, half not. When I reached the road, my chest burned, lungs screaming. No footprints, no trace. The path had wiped itself clean. I got home and didn't speak a word to anyone. My gear was still wet, though I'd left it in the vestibule. Boots soaked through again, even though they had been zipped shut in the tent. It made no sense. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every shift in the wind sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Weeks later, I tried to rationalize it. Old animals, settling snow in odd ways, frost heaving the ground, my mind playing tricks. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. The looped tracks, the tent appearing ahead of us, the folding landscape. It was deliberate, intelligent, malicious. One evening, I dug through some old forestry records, maps, and journals archived at the county office. Most of it was routine: trail maintenance, snow measurements, wildlife counts. But buried in a file from the 1970s, I found notes on the same ridge. Odd phenomena, reported by hikers and rangers alike. Disappearing landmarks, footprints that didn't match any known species. Tents found exactly where they'd been left, even after hikers had supposedly moved miles away. One ranger had scribbled a warning in the margin. "Do not stray into the basin. The snow doesn't forgive." I never went back. Not alone. Not with anyone. I stuck to familiar trails during daylight, far from the basin, far from the ridge. Even now, if I hear wind rustling oddly through the trees, or see snow shifted in impossible patterns, I can feel it. Eyes watching, the loop tightening, the weight of something patient and ancient. Months later, Tessa mentioned the trip in passing. Just a few words. "Remember that first night?" She didn't need to say more. We both remembered. We still remember. Every time we hike, even on well-marked trails, There's a part of us that listens, that waits, for the snow to shift, for the prints to appear, for the forest to fold in. And I know if we ever went back to that ridge, the clearing would be waiting. The prints would be back, bounding, looping, impossible. And the tent would be exactly where we left it, even if we hadn't walked a step. Because some things in the woods don't follow the rules. They aren't bound by gravity, by time, by reality. They wait. They watch. And when you see them, even just for a moment, you understand why the forest feels alive in the dark, why the snow looks perfect and untouched, why the ridge seems to move when you're not looking. We never spoke about it much after that. Sometimes, the thought alone makes the hair on my arms stand on end. Even years later, when the world feels safe and predictable, a shadow in the corner of the yard or a sudden hush outside will make me pause, heart hammering. I'll think back to that clearing, to those tracks, to the basin that swallowed the light. And I know the truth. The woods hold things that aren't meant to be understood. Things that wait. And no matter how far you go, how fast you run, or how well you think you know the trail, they always find a way back into your path. My cousin Jace and I had this plan to escape for a few days before the holiday chaos started. We figured mid-December would be quiet enough to dodge the crowds and actually enjoy some peace. Jace was all about the kind of solitude you couldn't fake on Instagram. Real silence in the woods. He spent weeks digging through maps and trail forums before picking a loop in northern Georgia, out past Hollow Ridge, barely a blip on the usual maps. Old fire tower roads, mostly forgotten, overgrown in places. He swore it hadn't been tracked or maintained since the late 90s. Perfect, he said, grinning. I trusted him. He knew these woods better than anyone I'd hiked with. He'd done long stretches of the Appalachian Trail before. When we pulled up to the ranger station, something felt off. No lights, windows dusty, abandoned. We trudged through a thin crust of snow up to the porch anyway. A crooked paper sign was taped to the door, telling people to register online. QR code faded to near uselessness. Jace shrugged. "We'll be fine," he said. "It's a 3-day loop. Hike in, sleep at a couple lean-tos, hike out. Easy. No steep climbs, no sketchy crossings." Honestly, the first day was almost normal. Quiet, exactly as Jace promised. Air was sharp, the sky a flat gray blue, and the only sound was our boots crunching frost and ice. We set up camp under a low ridge around 4, got the stove going, made soup, shared a flask or two, and crashed early. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up because my bladder refused to cooperate. I didn't want to wake Jace, so I slipped out of the tent carefully, walking uphill toward the rock outcrop where we'd hung our food bags. Stars were faint, dimly shining through clouds. I did my business, zipped back up, and as I turned to head down, I froze. There it was. A step. One slow crunch in the brush below. Not a raccoon scattering, not a deer bounding. Deliberate, heavy. Another step, then silence. I crouched, heart hammering, waiting. After maybe 2 minutes, nothing. I backed down toward the tent, slipped inside, said nothing. Jace was still snoring softly. The next day, things started to feel wrong. According to our map, we were supposed to hit the second lean-to by late afternoon. But the trail was harder to follow than it should have been. Blazes were faint, some missing entirely. Snow could have washed them away, Jace said. We pushed on, assuming we were near, but every clearing was empty. No shelter, no trail markers, just scrub brush, smooth snowbanks, and weird gaps where trees should have been. I checked my phone anyway. GPS showed us almost a mile northeast of where we should have been. But we hadn't strayed. We followed every blaze we could see. Around 3 p.m., Jace stopped suddenly and pointed. Through a line of pines, I saw a flash of white steel. Pushing through the trees, we stumbled into a clearing and a fire tower. But it wasn't on the map. The tower on our map had been dismantled decades ago. This one was standing, rusted in patches but solid, stairs intact, platform with railings. I pulled the map again. Nothing indicated another tower here. We didn't climb it. Something about the clearing felt wrong. Too neat, too perfect. We just stared. After a long pause, Jace said, "Let's camp nearby. Get lights going." That night, we didn't sleep. The wind picked up, but it wasn't normal. It moved in patterns, dragging across the ridge in a way that almost sounded like murmured words. Not language, just the rhythm of someone speaking far away, yet somehow close. I don't know if Jace noticed. He didn't say a word. I stayed tense, listening. By morning, I made up my mind. I wanted out. I told Jace straight, "Let's just retrace. We weren't that far in." He looked at the map, then slowly nodded. "Yeah, backtrack." But we didn't. We followed what should have been the same path, same direction, same terrain. Except the blazes had changed, or vanished. Trees looked closer together, then farther apart. At one point, we passed a boulder I was sure we'd seen 2 hours earlier, from the opposite side. Jace kept checking his phone, hoping for a signal. There wasn't one. That night, we camped in a hollow that looked sheltered. No wind, no sounds. I stayed close when I stepped out to pee just a few feet from the tent. That's when I saw it. A pine branch, bent almost to the ground like something heavy had leaned on it. Its tip brushed the snow. I froze. Then it moved slowly, smoothly, like someone was holding it up from the other side. Nothing visible. I backed inside without a sound, zipped the tent tight, and didn't even try to sleep. The next day, we barely spoke. Jace muttered under his breath, planning directions, insisting we head west, push toward the road, don't stop too long. Around noon, we saw a trail marker. Bright red, freshly painted. Not on our map. Desperate, we followed it. It led us to a small A-frame shelter under a rock ledge. Didn't look used in decades, no ash, no footprints. Inside, just snow and a single blue mitten, half frozen to the floorboards. Kid-sized. That night, neither of us slept. Just sat in our bags, waiting. After 3 a.m., Jace whispered, "Don't look quick." But someone, or something, was at the tree line. I turned slowly. A figure, tall, holding something pale in one arm. Face unseen, motionless, watching. By sunrise, it was gone. We didn't speak, didn't eat. Packed everything up fast. I told Jace, "I don't care where the trail goes. Down. No more loops." He didn't argue. We followed the slope, guessing directions, slipping through brush, cutting across creeks. Finally, we crested a hill I recognized, the same ridge from day one. Then we saw it. Our tent. Set up in the exact same hollow. Same gear, same fly, same arrangement. We hadn't moved anywhere. I lost it. Threw our stuff into the snow, desperate for proof we'd imagined none of it. But it was ours. That was our last night out there. The next morning, we didn't linger. I was still shaking, the chill crawling under my skin. Jace kept his hood up, hands stuffed in his pockets, staring at the hollow like it might somehow swallow him whole. I didn't argue. We packed fast, grabbed the bare essentials, and pushed down the slope, trying to pick out landmarks I recognized. But the forest had changed overnight. Trees that were far apart yesterday were now impossibly close. bending inward like they were forming a tunnel around us. Every familiar stump, every jagged rock felt off, twisted, wrong, like the woods had rearranged themselves while we slept. Even my boots felt heavier, as if the snow itself resisted our steps. About 40 minutes in, I glanced down at the GPS. It refused to load. The screen spun, blank. No signal. I didn't even argue with it. That's when I noticed the repetition. A dead birch, split down the middle like a broken wishbone, appeared again. I froze. Jace walked past it slowly, squinting. "We already saw this," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, but maybe it's the same one?" His voice wasn't certain. It wasn't. We were caught in a loop. The landscape folded over itself. Familiar hills and depressions repeated like a nightmare version of déjà vu. We started walking faster, pushing through the crunch of snow that sounded sharper than usual, echoes bouncing too long off the trees. After what felt like miles, we came to a fork. Two trails splitting at a shallow angle, both looking worn, neither with signage. Both paths were new to us, or maybe just rearranged. I opened my mouth to joke about flipping a coin when Jace stiffened. He was staring at a snowbank. A set of prints had appeared overnight. Same strange shape as the tracks from the night before, wide, flat, hoof-like. Snow seemed to have molded itself around them, growing into the shape. We took the other path. It straightened immediately, the trees opening up slightly. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Jace stopped dead. Ahead, in a small clearing, our tent was there. Exactly where we'd camped the night before, still set up, untouched. Same fly, same arrangement. My stomach twisted. We hadn't turned around, hadn't doubled back. The trail had been straight. I walked up slowly, unzipped the tent, and froze. Sleeping bags were half-zipped, gloves on top, exactly where we'd left them. Warm. Too warm. Jace was already backing away. "We're leaving, now," he said. No argument, just motioning. We didn't speak, just moved, heads down, eyes scanning the repetitive woods. The forest folded again. Crooked trees, bent pines, fallen branches repeated 3 times. Finally, we reached a clearing with a single wooden post. No sign, just a rotted board nailed in a rusted bracket. 4 trails split off, each identical. Air heavy, fingers numb, legs aching. Jace pointed to one trail. "It's this one," he said. His voice wasn't right, flat, monotone, not his usual drawl. "How do you know?" I asked. "I've already been down the others," he replied. We followed, silent. He stopped once to let me catch up. His smile was off, forced, not his own. I handed him a granola bar. He held it, didn't eat, just kept moving, the snow crunching too loud in the muted forest. Another hour passed. Then, suddenly, we hit pavement. A strip of road cutting through the trees. Frost-covered green sign, Route 211. Our car sat 50 feet away, covered in frost, untouched. Everything inside looked normal. We climbed in. Jace turned the heat on, stared ahead, silent. We didn't speak until halfway back to town. Words felt useless, as if speaking might pull the forest back into the car with us. Even after returning, I couldn't shake it. The woods had loops, impossible folds. Nothing was as it seemed. Tracks that weren't ours, snow that reshaped itself, shelters that appeared out of nowhere. That was the thing that haunted me the most. The tent. Our tent. Same hollow, same arrangement, like a copy of reality itself. I tried to rationalize. Maybe we'd been lost. Maybe exhaustion warped perception. Maybe snow and light had tricked us. But every detail, the way the branch bent, the hoof-like tracks, the silent figure at the tree line, none of it could be explained away. Not the GPS looping endlessly. Not Jace's voice changing when he pointed to the trail. Weeks later, I passed through that area again with a local ranger, cautiously, to see if I could confirm anything. The forest looked normal from the road, unremarkable. No trace of the fire tower, no fresh A-frame shelter, no tracks. Even the hollow where the tent had been pitched looked like any other depression in the woods. I've never gone back. Not alone, not with anyone else. Jace and I still talk, but we don't talk about the loop. We both know what we saw, or at least what we experienced. Something in those woods is aware. It can fold space, rearrange terrain, mimic our camp, our footprints, even us. Sometimes at night, I swear I hear snow crunching just outside my window. Pause. Another crunch. I tell myself it's the wind, but it's deliberate, heavy. The kind of sound that makes your skin crawl. The kind that reminds you of the figure at the tree line, still standing, still watching, still patient. That loop, the hollow, the twin tents, the fire tower that shouldn't exist, is burned into my memory. I know better than to ever return. You can prepare, you can map, you can follow every blaze. Doesn't matter. These woods don't play by our rules. I keep my boots clean, my gear packed, ready to run if needed. I don't hike North Georgia alone anymore. Not past Hollow Ridge. Not past the A-frame. And I never wander after dark. Because if you do, the forest will fold itself around you, and when you think you've escaped, you'll find your own camp waiting to remind you you never left at all. My shift at the records vault kicked off at 3 in the afternoon, and I was already fiddling with the side door keypad when the first weird thing happened. The code went through, the screen clicked like usual, and then, before I even touched the handle, it clicked again and reset itself. The numbers blinked out like someone had wiped the slate clean. I punched it in a second time. Worked fine. Just a small hiccup, enough to make me double-check the battery, but not enough to slow me down. I handled midweek inventory at Halloway Storage, a private warehouse tucked just outside Briarbridge. The building had that old industrial vibe, but the shelving was modern, and the climate system hummed low, steady, almost comforting. I liked it because nothing moved unless I moved it. No surprises, no misplaced boxes, everything in its place. I started in Bay 4, the biggest section. I rolled my scanner down the aisle, tapped each pallet tag, and moved along. Everything lined up perfectly, until I got to shelf K9. The container there wasn't what the manifest said it would be. Manifest showed a medical archive in a long gray bin. Instead, I found a squat blue case with a cracked corner. Scanned it. No match. Nada in the system. I shrugged, put it on the cart to show the morning supervisor, and kept going. Mistakes happen. Rushed intake clerks. Totally normal. Finished Bay 4, pushed toward Bay 6. Lights flicked once and steadied. Small thing, I told myself. Motion sensors probably needed recalibration. Went back to the checklist, moved on. About an hour later, I was shuffling outgoing bins near the loading dock when the rolling door groaned. Faint, like it was flexing under its own weight. I hadn't touched the switch. Door didn't rise, but the chain tensed, then released. Settled with a soft thump. I stared, waited. Nothing else. Reset the bins, checked the panel. Everything looked normal. Air pressure, probably. Temperature shift outside, frame expanding. Logged it in my notes. Went back to the main aisle. The aisle felt different. Longer. Didn't think much at first. Then I noticed row B stretching farther than normal. The last shelf sat deeper into the corridor, like someone had added an extra section overnight. Checked the rack number, counted backward, everything aligned. But B2 had never stretched that far. Walked its length, counted tags, reached the end, turned. Nothing. The aisle stayed extended. Shelves didn't snap back. Left the aisle, circled to the opposite end. Row B looked normal again. Stepped back in. Extension returned. Out again. Normal. In again. Extended. I didn't bother writing it down, just moved on. Went to the office to check the incoming log. Computer timestamp 4:23. Phone 3:46. Reset display settings. Network hiccup, I figured. Office clock matched the computer. Phone still lagging. Stared at both, wondering which was wrong when I heard it. Faint scraping of plastic bins behind me. Sliding. Too even, too measured. Tracked it to bay 3, second aisle. Everything in place. Boxes level, shelves aligned. Bent down to check a lower rack, blue case gone. Cart, floor, shelves, nothing. 5 minutes later, I found it in bay 6, sitting neatly on a high shelf. Had to grab a step stool. Positioned deliberately, corner catching overhead light. Scanned again, still unregistered. Plopped it on the office desk, away from everything else. Didn't want to rehandle the basics. Reorganized outgoing orders. Counted twice, cross-checked, sealed containers. When I wheeled them to the dock, the rolling door chain tensed again. Slow, deliberate. Like someone outside gave it a careful tug. Step back. Wait. Soft metal shift. Silence. Checked the side entrance. Keypad displayed an access log. New entry with the same time discrepancy. Code didn't match anyone on our roster. Too long, too many digits. Cleared it. Checked the bolt manually. Decided to finish the shift quickly. No dawdling. Went bay by bay with the cart. Verified essentials. Focused. Didn't recheck anything that had seemed off. Everything seemed normal until I hit the narrow corridor connecting bays 1 and 2. Usually straight, low ceiling, one overhead light. But the far door was gone. Corridor stretched impossibly long, beyond building width. Turned around, starting doorway normal. Forward. Endless. Walked halfway, stopped. Air heavy. Light flickered, steadied. Corridor ended abruptly. No exit. Just a flat panel blocking the way. Walked back. Original length restored. Stepped forward again. Normal. Didn't test a third time. Final part. Locking the bays. Each metal slider sealed its entrance. 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Bay 3. Lights flicked off when I touched the switch. Blackout. Never happened unless main breaker tripped. Stepped in, hand trailing shelves. 2 paces. Light snapped on. Shelves shifted, widened the aisle by inches. Bins cast shorter shadows. I backed out. Layout didn't revert. Left bay 3 open. Against protocol. Returned to office. Printed note for morning crew. Layout inconsistencies in several bays. Verify with supervisors before rearranging. Placed it beside the blue case. The case was open. Latch unlocked. Lid slightly raised. Inside, foam insert empty. No items. Nothing to explain its origin. Cereal sticker torn cleanly in half. Closed it. Shoved it under the desk. Didn't log. Just wanted out. Powered down lights bay by bay. Warehouse dimmed in sections. Locked interior gate. Headed for side entrance. Keypad accepted my code first try. Stepped outside. Sky deep early evening blue. Phone matched office computer. Walked to my car, engine started. Didn't look back. I thought leaving the building would be the end of it. But even as I drove down the empty stretch of road, the unease clung to me like wet clothes. Every shadow along the tree line seemed to stretch and twist. My headlights caught glimpses of shapes moving at the edge of the road, or maybe I imagined them. Couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out. Next day I tried to brush it off. Coffee in hand, recounting details to my buddy over the phone, I told myself it was exhaustion, a long shift in an empty warehouse. But my stomach never settled. I kept replaying the blue case, the way it moved, the aisle that stretched like it had its own will. When I went back for my usual shift on Thursday, the security cameras told me nothing. Footage from the night before showed me walking the aisles alone, just as I remembered. No anomalies, no one else on the floor. Yet I couldn't ignore the timing. Every strange thing had happened after I interacted with the case. That cracked blue box. Whoever, or whatever, had touched it before me had left a trail I couldn't see. I started in Bay 4 again, trying to act normal. But the second I stepped into aisle B, my stomach dropped. The shelves looked wrong. Not damaged, not displaced like before, just off. Subtle, barely perceptible shifts. The end of the aisle seemed farther away than it should. I counted the racks. Every tag was correct. Everything aligned perfectly. But the air felt heavier, almost pressurized, like the aisle was holding its breath. I ignored it and kept moving. Checked every pallet tag. Scanned, cross-checked, repeated. Nothing seemed out of place. Until I got to Bay 6. There it was, the blue case, sitting on the same high shelf. Corner cracked, catching the fluorescent glare. I didn't put it there. Couldn't have. The cart had been empty, nothing nearby. I climbed up, grabbed it, weighed it. Nothing inside. Foam pressed like it was still waiting for something that never came. By mid-afternoon, the warehouse felt alive. Not in a good way. Every echo of my footsteps felt delayed, like the building was bending time just to watch me move. Rolling doors hummed, lights flickered. Air vents groaned, sending tiny drafts that brushed my neck like fingertips. I tried to finish early, but every step seemed slower than the last. Then came the sound. Metal dragging across concrete. Soft, but deliberate. I froze. It came from Bay 3. Walked cautiously toward the sound, hand brushing the shelf edges. Nothing. But the aisle itself, row B, stretched again, longer than before. I measured in my mind, counted the racks. Extension precise, deliberate. Whoever or whatever was moving the shelves wasn't clumsy. I wanted to leave. I wanted to just walk out and never come back. But the building had other plans. When I reached the corridor between bays 1 and 2, the ceiling seemed lower, the walls closer. The lights flickered in a slow rhythm. The doorway at the far end wasn't there, just a solid wall. I stepped back. Original doorway stayed. Stepped forward. Corridor returned to normal. Heart racing, I didn't try again. Bay 3 remained the worst. Lights died completely when I touched the switch. Complete blackout. I moved inside by memory, tracing the edges of the shelves. 2 paces, light came back. Shelves rearranged subtly. Aisle wider. Shadows different. I backed out, heart hammering. The aisle didn't return to normal. I couldn't leave it. Left bay 3 open. Against protocol. Returned to office. Blue case open. Foam insert empty. Serial sticker torn cleanly in half. No fingerprints. No sign anyone had touched it besides me. I shut it and shoved it under the desk. Didn't log it. Didn't care. Just wanted to go. Powering down lights row by row, the warehouse grew dark in measured sections. Each click of the switch felt heavier than the last. Final row went black, interior gate locked. Side entrance accepted my code. Stepped outside. Sky nearly black. Cold air hit my face. Phone finally synced with office computer. Walked to my car, started engine. Didn't look back. But the unease followed. Driving home, every shadow seemed deeper. Every empty lot looked like someone, or something, was crouched, waiting. I checked the rearview mirror compulsively. Nothing. Just road. Just trees. Yet I felt watched. Next morning, I couldn't shake the memory of Bay 3. The aisle stretching, the shelves shifting, the rolling doors groaning like some heavy hand had pulled them. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't just a glitch. That blue case was a trigger. Something inside, or maybe attached to it, was alive in a way I couldn't explain. I didn't go back for a week. When I finally did, the place seemed normal. Empty, silent, just as I remembered. I checked row B. Perfectly aligned. Corridor normal. Bay 3 lights worked as usual. Blue case gone. No sign it had ever existed. I told myself it was a hallucination. Tired eyes, imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew better. That warehouse, that place, it could bend, stretch, rearrange itself. And the blue case, it had a way of calling attention, of making you see things you shouldn't. I quit a month later. Couldn't stand the quiet that was too loud, the shadows that lingered long after lights went out. Holloway Storage sits there still, quiet as ever. But every time I pass it, I glance at the side entrance, half expecting to see the keypad blinking, the door shifting slightly, just waiting for someone to walk in. And I know, if that happens again, the blue case, or whatever it was, will be waiting too.